This past weekend, pride was shown and glory was sought as Pro Wrestling Eternal returned to the Akron, Ohio VFW Hall. Both Eternal champions took new partners and faced off against established tag teams. The man with the largest stature took on the man with the largest fight to find out who would be the number one contender for the heavyweight championship. And a debuting wrestler looked to kick off his Eternal career in an explosive way. We'll go over all of that and more in this episode of Pro Wrestling Eternal's Event Center. Welcome to episode 3 of the Eternal Event Center. I am your host, 240, and we have hell of an episode for you today. We're going to cover our most recent outing, Pride and Glory, blow by blow, to keep you up to date with everything Eternal. We've also got some match announcements for our return to the Morris Community Center in Chicago, Illinois in the month of March, now called Eternal Breakthrough. But before we continue on, we have some headlines and scuttlebutt to address. During our debut weekend, we had some unfortunate injuries to Jason O'Connor and Calder Tag. During the main event of Eternal Championship Double Shot Night 1, O'Connor's wrist, which had been tweaked earlier in the night, was targeted by acid and worked over pretty harshly. After speaking with the Eternal medical staff, it was determined that O'Connor had not broken anything, but was not medically cleared for Night 2 and was thusly barred from the building. When the event center reached out to Jason prior to Pride and Glory, he assured us that his wrist was completely healed and that he was looking forward to getting his hands on the masked man, now known as the Eternal Cruiserweight Champion. Calder Tag was also injured on Night 1 during the 8-man Heavyweight Championship showcase by the hands of eventual Heavyweight Champion Greg Hennig. Tag's shoulder, while also not broken, was severe enough to take him out of the Heavyweight tournament on Night 2. While not medically cleared to wrestle that night, Calder did have his managerial license to second his brother Wolfie to the ring. Catching up with the hot tags at a local gym just a couple of days ago, it's obvious that Calder is still very tender and was favoring his shoulder throughout his workout. The brothers' tag, however, stated they were ready to get back to Akron and take their frustrations out on Greg Hennig. Now to venture into the land of speculation. It's been said that Pro Wrestling Eternal Management has put together contract offers for 2 highly sought-after free agents. While we haven't been able to verify the names, what we do know for sure is 2 packages were sent from the Eternal offices to the New York area and the second to Winnipeg. Word around the Eternal water cooler is both men may be available as soon as the March show in Chicago. But we will have to see what, if anything, comes from these rumors. Now, before we head over to Akron and the results of Pride and Glory, we're going to take a detour through the Eternal exhibit and spotlight a man who debuted that night, Tavon Blake Jr. With just over 5 years of in-ring experience, the 25-year-old Tavon Blake Jr. is a relative newcomer to the business but has shown an incredible aptitude inside the squared circle. After earning his associates in sports biology, Blake turned his attention to his true passion and found tutelage under Canadian Golden Combat Hall of Famer Destiny, who ran a short-lived wrestling school in the Los Angeles area after his retirement. After spending the next 2 years in the SoCal independent scene, Tavon made his first appearance with a name promotion when he debuted with Grim SoCal Wrestling at Game of Death 2016. Standing out as one of the only traditional-style wrestlers in the weapon-laden war zone, Blake spent the last 3 years speaking out against the hardcore style and the lives of the men who partake in that lifestyle. Although firmly the villain to the GSW crowd, TBJ hopes to be more warmly received by the Eternal fans. The Event Center staff were able to meet up with Tavon Blake Jr. prior to his debut this past Friday. When asked what he looked forward to the most as a part of the Eternal roster, Blake commented that he was excited to finally get an opportunity against other men who work a style more like his. Blake continued by saying that he feels that he hasn't been able to expand his technical repertoire because he only fights brawlers in Cali, and the styles in Eternal are so much more varied. When asked about his goals, Blake laughed and replied, "The heavyweight championship, obviously, but in a grander sense, just proving I belong in the conversation as the best wrestling heavyweight this business has." And as always, a small factoid for our loyal watchers about the man exhibited today. Although it does sound like there would be, there is not, and has never been, a man with the name of Tavon Blake Sr. That has been your Eternal exhibit showcasing members of the Eternal roster. And now we turn our attention to Friday, February 28th at the VFW Post 2108 in beautiful downtown Akron, Ohio. In front of an amazing 236 fans, Pro Wrestling Eternal was happy to present our first named event, Eternal Pride and Glory. To kick off our event and to welcome the crowd for the evening, Lee Wright made his way to the ring. Wright took the opportunity to announce that he has been given a new title since the debut show. Not just would Lee Wright act as an interviewer, but he would also be the crowd's liaison to the Eternal Board of Directors. And his first act as liaison was to announce Pro Wrestling Eternal's newest debut, Tavon Blake Jr. Blake made his way to the ring but was greeted by relative disinterest. As the interview got rolling, Blake's comfortability with the mic and natural charisma began swinging the crowd in his favor. But just as he was hitting his stride and the crowd was firmly behind him, the music of Danny King shook the crowd and they began booing. King began by letting Blake know that he shouldn't get used to all this pomp and circumstance, that Eternal is no different to any other wrestling promotion, and the fans are no different than any other fans. King tells Blake that they will all turn their backs on Blake as soon as it benefits them. Blake tries to cut King off, but then he just speaks over him, and Blake backs down. To prove his point about him not mattering, King asked Tavon if Eternal even bothered telling him who his opponent was for the night. Blake said he hadn't been told, but his match was later so that there was still time. King looked at Wright and asked, "Should I tell him? Or do you plan to?" Wright, obviously caught off guard, apologized to Tavon, saying he thought someone else had already told him, but he was going to open the show and his opponent was Denny King. King took the opportunity to smash his microphone into the side of Blake's head and began laying the boots in before he was pulled away by Wright and the other Eternal officials. After the referees got the situation handled, the kickoff match got officially started. Blake spent the early part of the match on the defensive, still reeling from the cheap shot from the veteran King. Denny kept the pressure and peppered Tavon from all angles. King took a few cheap shots as he maneuvered Tavon around the ring, putting the referee out of position to take advantage of the youngster. Blake was finally able to turn the tide of battle with some snug wrestling holds, wearing Denny down and giving himself time to breathe. But this reprieve was shorter than he had hoped for, as King took control again with a inadvertent eye poke. Tavon fought hard, but ultimately was unable to get back any momentum before King coaxed TBJ to the top rope and landed the superplex for the pinfall victory in 17.5 minutes. After the match, King took the microphone again and addressed his down opponent. Denny told Tavon not to be upset about losing tonight. Ultimately, King said, it's not his fault. Because how could someone so green be expected to win against somebody with the experience that King has? King told Blake not to be angry with himself. Instead, be angry at Eternal. It's their fault you weren't prepared for this. And it's their fault you never had a chance to begin with. King returned to the backstage area, showered in the boos of the crowd. Next out, the diminutive dynamo Johnny Heights entered the ring with something on his mind. Heights tells the crowd that even though he was able to get a win against someone from the Cruiserweight tournament a couple weeks ago in Chicago, he feels he still hasn't earned the respect of the Eternal management, or more importantly, the current Eternal Cruiserweight champion, Acid. Heights wants to put the world and the masked man on notice, announcing he will beat every man in the Eternal Cruiserweight division if he has to get a match with the champ. But to continue his path to that championship, he turns his attention to the opponent for the evening, Jules Knight. Heights tells the crowd that he intends to put the Sandman to sleep quick and move up the rankings towards the gold. Unfortunately for Johnny, Jules wouldn't go peacefully into the night. Bringing the fight to Heights from the jump, Jules made it very difficult for Johnny to impose his will much at all. Knight was able to wrestle circles around his opponent for the early part of the match, and while Heights was never in real trouble, it was clear that he wasn't prepared to fight from underneath. Slowly, Johnny was able to even the field and made the bout a much more back-and-forth affair. Approaching the 20-minute mark, it became fairly obvious that the first man to get his finish would be the man who picked up the victory. This is exactly what happened as Heights was whipped to the rope and came back at incredible speed with the anecdote double knee strike, securing the pinfall victory and able to continue his quest to prove himself. After a brief intermission, Liaison Lee Wright returned to the ring and said he was proud to announce that the next time that Pro Wrestling Eternal would return to Akron, Ohio and VFW Post 2108 would be Friday, June 26th. And when we return, we would be debuting a new match type known as the Eternal Rampage. If you are interested in the Eternal Rampage and our return to Akron, I suggest you continue tuning in to the Event Center, as we will be revealing more about the match and its participants as we get closer to the month of June. Next, Wright introduced two men that would be in the main event of the evening, taking on the Eternal Cruiserweight Champion Acid and his partner Silver Tiger. Wright introduced Jason O'Connor and Robbie McNamara, the team of Bleed Green. O'Connor and McNamara were warmly received by the Akron crowd as they began to run down the events of Championship Double Shot Weekend. O'Connor promised that since he was fully healed from his injury, there was nothing stopping him from exacting revenge against the masked duo, who so viciously attacked him to close Eternal's first outing in Akron. McNamara planned to return the favor for his loss at Night 2 by submitting the Cruiserweight Champion in front of the loyal Eternal fans there in Akron. As Bleed Green made their way towards the entrance area, the young hot tags stormed through the curtain. There was a bit of tension as the experienced team of O'Connor and McNamara were obviously upset with being interrupted, but the oblivious Tag Brothers continued stomping to the ring, demanding their opponents get their asses to the ring so they can give Hennig what's due to him. Griffith made his entrance but stayed at the curtain until Hennig made his way out, obviously hesitant to put himself near the two youngsters without immediate backup. The match began with Hennig and Calder in the ring together. Hennig tried to take the opportunity and apologize again, repeating that he was sorry that Calder was injured. Calder, however, took the open shot and cracked Hennig in the mouth with a solid palm strike, setting the tone. The intensity of the match stayed high as the tags consistently put pressure on their opponents, with a barrage of stiff strikes and using their weight to overpower the smaller men. Although being pushed pretty heavily by the rookie team, Hennig never tried to even the playing field with Calder by targeting his shoulder. Greg tried his best to be the honorable man and not further injure the shoulder of Calder, but Griffith had no qualms about attacking that shoulder with a viciousness he hadn't seen from him in his previous matches in Eternal. Although facing a combined 33 years of experience, the cohesiveness that the brothers had kept them in the driver's seat for the majority of this 16-minute match. In contrast, Griffith and Hennig just could not get on the same page. Most double teams they attempted were either sloppily done or completely failed. The match came to a close as Griffith, who had been getting beaten down by Calder, refused to tag out to the fresher Hennig. Griffith attempted to get back to his feet when Wolfie tagged in Calder. Wolfie sprinted to Hennig's corner and hit him with a Mafia kick, knocking the heavyweight champ to the outside. Calder picked Griffith up and held him in the tombstone position, allowing Wolfie to turn and boot the restrained Jack in the back of the head before Calder drove Griffith's head into the mat in a sequence the tags call the Montana Slammer. A 3 count later, and the rookie hot tags have picked up a victory against the Eternal heavyweight champion. The tags, clearly stoked over their first win in Eternal, took their exit to a swath of jeers from the crowd. Hennig, finally shaking the stars from around his head, made his way back into the ring and to the still supine Griffith. Hennig got down by Jack and began to stir him, but as soon as Griffith got his bearings together, he began pushing Hennig away. Greg, obviously confused, tried to help Jack to his feet, but was shoved away and shouted down by the worn ring warrior. Griffith demanded that he be allowed to get to his own feet on his own, and when he did, he angrily rejected any further help to get himself to the locker room, leaving Hennig to follow slowly behind as they made their exits. The next match of the night was to determine the man to receive the first opportunity at Hennig's Eternal Heavyweight Championship at our return to Chicago in March. Both men took part in the Heavyweight Championship tournament and put on some impressive performances, prompting this return match. To ensure that we have a definitive name for Chicago, the Pro Wrestling Eternal management had the match competed under no disqualifications, falls count anywhere in the VFW post rules. Luckily for the crowd in Akron, both Gringo Starr and Colossus took advantage of these conditions. The fight came to a quick start as both men clashed in the center of the ring with furious flurries and immediately took the fight to the crowd. The match was full of chairs being swung or thrown, garbage cans being dumped and slammed, and even a fan's purse getting involved. Colossus tossed the bloody Star into a group of fans by his head, causing a fan to abandon her bag at the feet of the large man. Colossus took the purse, dumped its contents out on top of Gringo before shoving the bleeding head of Star into the bag and kicking it off of his head. There wasn't a corner of the venue that was spared from the wrath of these men. Gringo even chased Colossus into the concession area, pelting the taller man with full cups of beer and soda before tackling Colossus through a table, but was only able to get a 2 count. In the 9th minute of the match, both men made their way back to ringside, prompting Colossus to grab the ring steps and striking Gringo in the head with a thunderous clatter. Colossus grabbed the staggered Star and finished the match by hitting the damnation drop onto the steps and getting the 3 count, punching his ticket to the main event of Eternal's next show. As his name was announced, Colossus entered the ring to celebrate his victory. Much to his surprise, Gringo Star staggered to his feet and tried to continue the fight. Colossus, enraged, stormed from the ring and began throwing Star around the ringside area before throwing him back into the ring. Colossus proceeded to break apart the guardrails, bridged the rail from the ring apron to another part of the railing, and re-entered the ring. Star, although beaten and battered, rose to his feet and charged the near 7-footer again, but was caught with a damnation drop in the center of the ring. Colossus, tiring of Star's superhero resilience, grabbed the lifeless man by the hair and lifted him to his feet. Colossus dragged the half-conscious man to the side of the ring, lifted him into the air once more, and threw Gringo Star over the top rope, where he crashed through the guardrail to the floor below. By this time, nearly the entire Eternal locker room emptied, hoping to ensure the rampaging giant wouldn't continue. But the smirk on his face showed just how proud of himself he was as he exited the ring area. The main event of the evening was delayed as Gringo Star was helped by medical staff and removed from the venue. But when the team of Acid and Silver Tiger was introduced to the crowd, they were ready to see the Eternal Cruiserweight Champion in action. Acid and Tiger were booed as they entered, but Acid seemed completely unfazed, as if the crowd wasn't even in the building. Newton's third law was clearly on display, as the fans' reaction to Bleed Green's entrance was just as loud, but full of cheers instead. This match went nearly 36 minutes, but was as fast and hard-hitting in the 35th minute as it was in the first. All 4 men took each other to the limit, but was not quite able to push anyone off the edge. Although primarily known for their technical abilities, both McNamara and O'Connor took to the air with an ease to keep the Acid Tiger team off their feet. But Acid and Tiger were just as quick to bring the quick grappling and submission wrestling to Bleed Green, catching them just as off guard. While not as prevalent as the early tag match, it was clear that the years of teaming together allowed Jason and Robbie to be that much smoother and that much more in step with each other than Acid and Tiger were. The crowd was hot for the entire match as there was no clear-cut favorites until the final moments of the match. Silver Tiger and Robbie McNamara were the legal men, and Tiger had taken McNamara off his feet with a Pele kick and ascended the top rope. Launching himself backwards with a beautiful moonsault, Tiger found the pool to be empty as McNamara rolled out of the way, causing Silver Tiger to crash into the mat. Robbie, quick to capitalize, rolled over to the downed Tiger and locked in the Subway STF. As Tiger reached out for the salvation of the bottom rope, Acid entered the ring, attempting to make the save. Unfortunately for him, however, Jason O'Connor was a few steps ahead and already in his mask as his second foot hit the mat. O'Connor leapt and hit Acid right across the neck and shoulders with a crossbody that caused both men to tumble over the top rope to the ringside below. As Acid and O'Connor scrambled to get back into the ring, McNamara wrenched the neck of Tiger even more and secured the submission victory for his team. Robbie released the STF and hopped to his feet to celebrate his victory. O'Connor met him in the ring and were announced the winners of the contest as both Acid and Silver Tiger made their exit. The lasting image for the crowd that night in Akron was a triumphant Bleed Green standing tall in the center of the ring. And with that, Eternal Pride and Glory is in the books. We here at the Eternal Event Center would like to offer our thanks again to the 236 fans that came on out to support us, and we look forward to seeing you again in June for Eternal Rampage. Now, we have one more big announcement before we turn our attention to Chicago, Illinois, and the card for our March show, Eternal Breakthrough. We are happy to announce that on Friday, April 24th, we will be making our debut in Grand Rapids, Michigan at the Grand Rapids Masonic Temple. In the main event of the evening, we will see Acid defend the Eternal Cruiserweight Championship. But to find out who his opponent will be, we have to get through Chicago first. Speaking of, let's take a look at what matches we have to offer on March 28th. Due to their win this past weekend, the Eternal Board of Directors has determined that Bleed Green, the team of Robbie McNamara and Jason O'Connor, will go one-on-one for the opportunity to main event our debut show in Grand Rapids against the Eternal Cruiserweight Champion, Acid. After getting a victory over the Eternal Heavyweight Champion this past weekend, the Hot Tags are looking to continue their winning ways in Eternal's first openweight matchup against the team of the Oklahoma Thunderbolt, Jason Patterson and Christopher Rubber Ball. Fairly surprising considering he picked up the win last weekend. Denny King has requested from the board a rematch against Tavon Blade Jr. When we reached out to King to find out his reasoning, King said that he was so impressed by Tavon that he wanted to see what Blake could do if he had a full month to prepare. Speaking of board requests, the man known as California Cool became quite heated after being left off of Pride and Glory and demanded that he be given a match for Chicago. Possibly biting off more than he can chew, he will get to go face to face with Southern Justice, Jack Griffith. In the main event of the evening, your Eternal Heavyweight Championship will be on the line as Greg Hennig defends his championship against Hell's favorite heathen, Colossus. You will get to see all this plus the continuation of Johnny Heights Open Challenge on Saturday, March 28th at the Morris Community Center in Chicago, Illinois. As always, doors open at 6 p.m. with a bell time of 7. And with that, this has been episode 3 of Pro Wrestling Eternal's Event Center, and we look forward to seeing you again in the next episode for the aftermath of Eternal Breakthrough. I've been your host, 240. I want to thank you for your time, and we hope to see you again.